Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth, let's get into it. There is a particular kind of disrespect that hides behind the word honesty. If somebody waits until there's a room full of witnesses to say they regret choosing you, pay attention. That is not courage. That is confusion looking for an audience. In this story, the lesson is simple and hard. Never let someone use your steadiness as a waiting room while they go searching for excitement somewhere else. My wife said it into a microphone with my mother 3 seats away. The fellowship hall at New Mercy Baptist smelled like baked macaroni, lemon furniture polish, and the butter glaze from my Aunt Charlene's pound cake. People were clinking forks against glass, finishing speeches, laughing too loud the way families do when the event is almost over and everybody is tired. Rochelle took the microphone because she had helped organize a retirement dinner for my mother, and Rochelle liked to control the way some people like perfume. She smiled, lifted her glass, looked right at me, and said, "If I am being honest, I still sometimes regret leaving Damon for Ellis." The room did not go silent all at once. It happened in pieces. First, my cousin Trina stopped laughing. Then somebody near the coffee urn whispered, "Lord." Then my mother lowered her eyes to her folded napkin, as if she could save me by refusing to look at my face. The microphone gave a small crackle after Rochelle finished, like even the sound system wanted to distance itself from what she had done. Rochelle stood there, with one hand around the stem of her glass, and the other smoothing the front of her green dress. She looked half shocked, half relieved, which somehow made it worse. If that kind of disrespect hit you the same way it hit Ellis, take a second right now to like this video. And if you have ever seen someone regret the person who loved them most only after it was too late, share this story with somebody who will understand it. Subscribe for more original cheating wife revenge stories, relationship betrayal dramas, and real consequence-based narration like this. I did not throw a chair. I did not curse. I did not give the people in that hall a story to carry home with their leftovers. I just sat there with my jaw locked so tight, I could feel it behind my ears. I tasted wintergreen from a mint I had dropped in my mouth before the speeches started, and for the rest of my life, I will probably associate that flavor with humiliation. My Uncle Vernon reached over and squeezed my shoulder once hard. I stood up slowly, not because I was calm, but because if I moved fast, I thought I might say something mean enough to live forever. Rochelle started to follow me before I even reached the side door near the church kitchen. Her heels clicked after me through the hallway, where old choir robes hung in a glass case. I pushed through the metal door into the cool April night. The parking lot still held some winter in it. Detroit wind has a way of slipping under your collar, like it has a grudge. Rochelle came outside, carrying her heels in one hand now. Her face flushed, lipstick smudged along the edge of a smile that had disappeared. "Ellis," she said, "wait." I kept walking until I got to my truck. "You do not get to say my name like that right now." I told her. My voice surprised me. It was low, flat, almost polite. That frightened her more than yelling would have. She put her heels down in the truck bed and wrapped her arms around herself. "I drank too much," she said. "I was nervous. It came out wrong." I looked at her for a long second. What part came out wrong? Damon? Regret? Or my name? Her eyes filled, but I had no use for tears that arrived after performance. I opened the driver's side door and said, "You need to call your sister." On the drive home, she kept trying to turn that sentence into something smaller than it was. I did not mean I wish I was with him now. Then, I mean sometimes I wonder about old choices. Then, you know how people say reckless things when they feel pressure. I drove west with both hands at 10 and 2, headlights sliding over wet pavement. The city passing in brick and neon and shuttered storefronts. A bus hissed to a stop near a corner store with barred windows. Somewhere a siren moved east. Rochelle was still talking when we pulled into our driveway, but I had stopped hearing words. All I could hear was the microphone. I had owned that brick bungalow before Rochelle, and I got married. It sat on a quiet block where people still swept their porches and argued about the Lions every autumn, as if heartbreak had not taught us enough. Inside, our house smelled faintly like the cedar oil I use on clocks and the ginger candles Rochelle burned even in warm weather. I flipped on the kitchen light. She stood by the table, one hand on the chair back, waiting for me to become the version of myself she understood best. Patient, reasonable, willing to explain my own pain in a way that made other people comfortable. "We are done," I said. No speech, no dramatic pause. Just the truth I could still afford to say before grief made me weak. Rochelle blinked twice. "Ellis, no. You do not end a marriage over one ugly sentence." I leaned against the counter because my knees had gone strange under me. "No, I end a marriage over the truth inside that sentence." She stared at me as if I had broken some contract by refusing to debate my own humiliation. "You are overreacting." That almost made me laugh. I said, "Call Adrian. Pack enough for a week. The rest can be arranged later." I did not always see it coming, which embarrassed me once I had enough distance to tell the story straight. 3 months before that dinner, life had still looked ordinary in the way ruin often does from far away. I ran a clock and watch repair shop near Livernois called Second Hand Time, a narrow place with old wood floors, brass parts and labeled drawers, and a bell over the door that sounded like somebody clearing their throat. I like quiet work, tiny springs, fine hands, patience. Rochelle used the T's that I trusted. Broken clocks more than living people, because clocks only lied when someone had tampered with them. She worked for a cultural nonprofit downtown, the kind of job that required blazers, donor smiles, and the ability to make impossible events sound charming. Rochelle was sharp, organized, and exacting. She folded tissue paper into clean squares instead of crumpling it. She straightened picture frames in waiting rooms that did not belong to her. She hated when people used the wrong serving spoon for the wrong dish. I loved that about her once. It felt like care. It felt like a woman who saw disorder and believed it could be corrected. Looking back, I think Rochelle liked order because disorder had embarrassed her before, and Damon had been disordered wearing expensive cologne. Damon Price was not a ghost from some teenage romance. He was a real man with a real history and enough leftover meat around him to make bad decisions look poetic. Rochelle and Damon had dated in college, then drifted into one of those on and off arrangements that exhausted everybody except the people in it. He was charming, loud, handsome in a deliberate way, always half an inch from a sales pitch. He had left Detroit years earlier for Houston. Rochelle told me that story during our second month together over chili cheese fries at Coney Island near midnight. "He made me feel dizzy," she said. "You make me feel safe." At the time, I heard that as praise. I was 34 then, old enough to know that dizziness is not the same thing as being devoted. My father had been a dizzy kind of man, all appetite and promises, and my mother spent years paying emotional bills he rang up in rooms he had already left. I built my life against that inheritance on purpose. I paid on time. I kept my word. I did not confuse noise for passion. When Rochelle chose me, I thought she had chosen peace with open eyes. I did not understand that some people treat peace like a coat they wear until the weather changes. The first thing that shifted was not dramatic. It was her phone. Rochelle had never been one of those people who floated around with her screen, turned away like she worked for the government. Then suddenly, the phone was face down at dinner. The passcode changed. She started taking calls in the laundry room with the dryer running. One night, I came in from the garage after oiling an old mantel clock, and she flipped her screen over so fast she knocked her water glass. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine," she said too quickly. Then she smiled a borrowed smile and asked about my day without listening to the answer. I could have pressed harder then. That was the first turn in the road. I chose not to. Not because I was blind, but because suspicion can make you ugly before it makes you right. My father used to accuse first and apologize never. I promised myself I would not live like that. So I told myself Rochelle was stressed. Her organization was preparing a spring donor gala. My mother's retirement dinner was coming up. We had been talking about maybe trying for a baby after summer. Life was crowded. Give grace before you give judgment. My mother always said. I gave grace until my hands were empty. Byron saw it before I admitted it. Byron had cut my hair since college and ran a barbershop where everybody talked too much and still somehow told the truth. He trimmed around my ears one Saturday morning while an old Frankie Beverly song played low from the radio and two men argued about property taxes near the front window. "Your face looks tired," Byron said, snapping the cape. "Marriage or money?" "Neither." I lied. He made a sound through his teeth. When a woman starts protecting her phone like it owes her child support, that is not traffic at work, brother. That is the weather. I laughed because that was easier than confessing fear in a room full of men who knew my walk. "You sound divorced," I told him. Byron held up the clippers. "I sound observant." Then he lowered his voice. "Talk to her now. Not after you have started inventing stories in your head." He was right. I knew he was right. But when I got home, Rochelle was in the kitchen slicing strawberries for a church brunch tray, humming softly, looking so ordinary and married that I lost my nerve. I told myself there was still time for a good conversation. There's always time until there is not. A week later, I had my second chance to become a different kind of husband. Rochelle was in the shower, singing under her breath, and her phone lit up on the bathroom counter with Damon's name bright across the screen. Not D, not some fake woman's name. Damon. The phone buzzed twice, then again. I stood there with a towel in my hand, looking at it. My chest tightened so hard I had to breathe through my nose. I could have picked it up, could have read everything, could have started gathering proof like a man building a legal case against his own life. I did not do it. I walked away because I still wanted an explanation I could live with. I wanted Rochelle to hand me the truth herself instead of me dragging it out of a phone screen like a raccoon in a trash can. I am not saying that made me noble. Some of it was fear. I knew that once I saw the full thing, whatever it was, there would be no returning to maybe. Maybe it is a soft room. Truth has sharp furniture. That night I asked her directly, "Why is Damon calling you?" She took exactly 3 seconds too long to answer. "He is back in town," she said. "It is nothing." Damon had reappeared because Rochelle's nonprofit was partnering with a media company on a summer arts campaign, and Damon had become one of those glossy men who attach themselves to projects, pose beside murals, and call themselves community-minded because they know how to hold a mic. He came back with white teeth, polished shoes, and a fresh reputation. Rochelle said he had asked to meet for coffee about sponsorship possibilities. I did not mention it because I knew you would make it weird, she told me. "You mean because it is your ex?" I said. "I mean because you can be rigid," she said, which was her elegant way of calling me difficult. That word stayed with me. Rigid. I started examining myself like a cracked watch face under magnification. Had I become too predictable? Too careful? Rochelle liked novelty. I liked consistency. She loved rooftop events and little boutique hotels, and saying yes to plans a day of. I loved Sunday dinners at my mother's, early mornings at Belle Isle, when the river looked silver, the deep satisfaction of fixing something with patient hands. I began doing what betrayed people often do. I auditioned for guilt. Maybe I was too settled. Maybe steady had started feeling dull. Maybe I had mistaken reliability for romance and expected applause for it. Then came little details that would have been nothing on their own and everything in a row. Rochelle bought a perfume she had never worn around me, something sharp and citrusy that entered a room before she did. She started caring about which earrings she wore to vendor meetings. She laughed at voice notes with one AirPod in while stirring grits. She came home one Thursday night with lake wind in her hair and said she had eaten already, though I found a takeout box from a downtown steak place in the passenger footwell the next morning. When I asked, she said I was starting to sound suspicious. She was right. Suspicious is what happens when your reality starts slipping under your feet. By then I had stopped sleeping well. I would lie beside Rochelle listening to the little throat noise she made before she settled, and wonder if I was lying next to my wife or next to a woman rehearsing departure. There is shame in that kind of uncertainty. People think being betrayed makes you instantly righteous. It does not. It makes you needy in private. It makes you stare too long at ordinary things for hidden meaning. It makes you apologize in your own head for boundaries you have not even spoken out loud. I tried once more to keep it between us. We went to a diner after church, one with sticky menus and a waitress who called everybody baby. Rain tapped the window beside our booth. I stirred my coffee until it went cold. Are you seeing Damon outside of work? I asked. Rochelle laid her napkin across her lap with precise little movements. Seeing how, she said. Do not do that. I told her. You know what I mean. She sighed like I was making her carry groceries she never bought. We have had coffee. A couple times. We have history, Ellis. That does not make it an affair. What does it make? I asked. Rochelle looked out the window before answering, which told me enough. Complicated, she said. I laughed once, not because anything was funny. Complicated is what people say when honesty would cost them too much. She leaned forward. You always want everything named and sorted and solved. Real feelings are messy. I remember the waitress arriving with my catfish plate then, setting it down between us, as if this was a normal marriage lunch. I could barely swallow 2 bites. On the ride home, Rochelle put her forehead against the passenger glass and did not speak, which somehow made me feel guilty for ruining her day. I should have left then. That is another truth I had to earn. Instead, I did what decent people with fear often do. I negotiated against myself. I told Rochelle that if Damon was going to remain in her orbit, I needed transparency. No hidden calls. No private dinners. No emotional nonsense disguised as friendship. She agreed to easily. That is fair, she said and kissed my cheek. For a week, she became sweet again. She asked about the shop. She brought home peach hand pies from Easter market. She ran her hand across my shoulders while I watched the news. False peace can be more dangerous than open conflict. My mother's retirement dinner had been on the calendar for months. 42 years in Detroit public schools, mostly as a reading specialist, and she had finally decided she was tired of dragging children toward books in a world that kept trying to offer them everything else. Rochelle threw herself into the event. She chose the gold table runners, printed the programs, called my cousins when they ignored the group chat, even arranged with church women to spell out congratulations, Ms. Yvonne and cupcakes. She moved through those preparations like a devoted wife. If I had not known better, I might have mistaken effort for loyalty. The afternoon of the dinner, I found Rochelle standing in our bedroom in a slip with one earring in, staring at herself in the mirror too hard. You all right? I asked. She blinked and smiled. Just tired. On the dresser sat her phone and a folded note card. I only saw 2 words before she turned over. Speak the truth. At the time, I thought it was an outline for her toast to my mother. I did not know my wife had prepared a public confession, like she was headed into battle with herself. Looking back, I think part of her wanted witnesses, so she could not take it back. When Rochelle finished her sentence at the microphone, she tried to correct it immediately. What I mean is, she said, laughing too brightly, life is funny and choices shape you. Nobody laughed with her. My cousin Deja stood half out of her chair, then sat back down because my aunt pinched her arm. My mother looked old for the first time in my life. I did not look at Rochelle again until we were in the parking lot, and she had started calling it a slip. You embarrassed my mother in front of everybody she has taught and prayed with for 20 years, I said. Do not call that a slip. Rochelle's sister Adrian picked her up that night. Adrian was protective in the way older sisters often are, even when the facts are ugly. She hugged Rochelle in our driveway while I stood under the porch light, feeling like a man outside his own body. Do not make permanent decisions while you are angry, Adrian told me quietly before they left. I respected Adrian, but I was too raw for wisdom wrapped like warning. This did not start tonight, I said. Tonight is just when she stopped hiding it. Adrian nodded once, and I could tell by her face that she already knew enough to stop defending Rochelle completely. The next morning, I opened the shop at 9 and stared at the same pocket watch for 20 straight minutes without seeing the mechanism. Rain hit the front window in gray sheets. The bell over the door rang, and old Mr. Carruthers came in for his weekly battery change, smelling like pipe tobacco and aftershave. You all right, son? He asked. I said yes automatically. He looked at me over his glasses. That was not a yes you believed. In Detroit, people mind your business and love you anyway. I changed his battery for free. He slipped a folded 5 onto the counter and pretended I had not. By noon, half the West Side had heard some version of what happened. Not because my family gossiped more than anybody else, but because public humiliation travels faster when there is church involved. I got calls from cousins, from my aunties, from 2 men I had not spoken to since high school who somehow still had my number. I let most of it ring out. Then my mother called. "Come by after work," she said. No pity in her voice. No performance. Just instruction. My mother had a way of speaking that made even grief stand up straighter. I closed the shop early and drove to her house with my stomach in knots. She was on the back porch shelling peas into a metal bowl when I arrived, a cardigan around her shoulders despite the damp. The porch always smelled like soil and bleach, and whatever she had cooked earlier. I sat beside her and listened to the shells click against the bowl. Finally, she said, "You do not owe anybody a graceful collapse." I looked over at her. "Everybody saw that, Ma." She kept shelling. "Yes, they did, which means they also saw you stand up and leave without becoming somebody ugly. Do not let people confuse calm with weakness." I did not cry then. I was still too stunned. Rochelle started texting that evening. Long apologies first, then shorter ones, then voice notes. I listened to exactly one. She sounded exhausted, like she had spent all day crying and explaining herself in circles. "I was trying to be honest," she said. "I handled it terribly, but I do love you." I deleted it. Love was not my question anymore. People love what they still disrespect all the time. My question was whether Rochelle had become the kind of woman who wanted 2 futures at once. The exciting one in private, the dependable one at home. I knew enough about myself to know I would die slowly inside that arrangement. 3 days later, at Rochelle's insistence and Adrian's request, we met at a diner in Dearborn where nobody knew us. I chose neutral ground because I did not want my memories of home collecting more damage. Rochelle looked smaller somehow, her hair pulled back, eyes swollen. She did not order food. I got black coffee and never touched it. "Tell me everything," I said. "Do not protect yourself. Do not protect him. Do not edit for tone." She held her cup with both hands. "We met for coffee 5 times, she said. "Twice for drinks. He kissed me once in the parking structure." She looked up. I kissed him back. There it was. Not a mystery anymore. Just a fact sitting between salt and pepper shakers. I felt oddly relieved for one ugly second. Mystery is exhausting. Truth, even terrible truth, at least lets you make decisions without chasing shadows. "Were you going to tell me?" I asked. Rochelle swallowed. I was trying to figure out what it meant. What it meant, I repeated. It meant you were married and still hearing old feelings. She flinched. "That is not fair." "Fair," I said. "You used my marriage like a waiting room while you tested whether your past still had electricity in it. Do not talk to me about fairness." Rochelle cried then, but more quietly than she had in the driveway. "Damon makes me feel—" She stopped. "Say it," I told her. She looked ashamed, which might have mattered earlier. "He makes me feel unfinished in a way that feels alive." That sentence closed something in me. I could feel it happen, like a deadbolt turning from the inside. I had spent months wondering if I was too dull, too structured, too old for the kind of love Rochelle wanted. Sitting there across from her, I understood the problem was not my steadiness. The problem was that she still romanticized instability. That is not something another person can fix for you. "I am filing," I said. Rochelle's mouth opened. "Ellis, wait. Counseling. Separation first. We owe the marriage that much." I leaned back in the booth and looked at this woman I had once trusted with every soft thing in me. "You already separated yourself," I said. "You just wanted me to keep paying emotional rent while you did it." She covered her face with both hands. For a moment, I almost reached across the table. Habit is powerful. Comfort can be muscle memory. But I did not. That was another turn in the road. I chose not to soothe the person who had broken me open and called it confusion. The filming was not dramatic. It was paperwork, receipts, account statements, and long, quiet stretches in waiting rooms that smelled like old carpet. Rochelle had used her personal account for most of the dinners with Damon, but a few hotel bar charges had hit our joint card. Seeing those line items made something hot and mean stir in me. I could have printed them and mailed them to every family member who still said I was being hasty. I could have humiliated her back. Instead, I handed everything to my attorney, Ms. Benedict, a no-nonsense black woman with silver locks and the patience of somebody who had seen worse than my heartbreak before lunch. "Do you want punishment?" Ms. Benedict asked me at our second meeting. "Or do you want closure?" That question saved me money and probably my soul. "Closure," I said after a long pause. She nodded. "Then stop fantasizing about making everyone understand. People build opinions out of scraps. Let the legal process do what it does." Rochelle asked for counseling again through her lawyer. I declined. Some people thought that made me hard. The truth was simpler. Counseling only works when both people are fighting for the same marriage. Rochelle was still grieving a fantasy. I was bearing an actual life. Those are not equal tasks. Damon came to my shop once in early June. The bell over the door rang, and there he was in a cream polo and expensive watch, carrying himself like a man who believed his own smile was a peace offering. I had imagined this scene in 100 violent little ways during sleepless nights. In every version, I looked cooler than I felt. In real life, my palms went damp. "Ellis," he said, as if we were meeting at a fundraiser, "I figure I should talk to you man to man." I set down my screwdriver. "There is no man to man here. There is you, and there is the marriage you walked into." To his credit, Damon did not pretend innocence. He gave me the polished version of remorse man, like him keep in a breast pocket. "I did not set out to disrespect you. You just did it anyway," I said. He glanced around the shop at the wall clocks, the pendulums, the little trays of parts. "Rochelle said you would make this black and white." I almost smiled. Of course she had. "No," I told him. "I am making it plain. You can have all the poetry you want. I prefer the plain." He left without touching anything. After he was gone, I locked the shop door and stood still until my hands stopped shaking. Summer settled over the city, hot and sticky, with storms that came in hard and then vanished before the streets finished steaming. Rochelle and Damon became public in the careless way people do when they mistake visibility for legitimacy. Friends saw them at riverfront concerts, at rooftop brunches, at a jazz night in Midtown. Nobody went out of their way to tell me. But news finds you when your life has become local cautionary folklore. Each report cut, though less than I expected. Pain changes shape when it stops being questioned. At least then I knew what I had been competing with. Not a better man, just an older fantasy wearing fresh shoes. There were nights I want to call Rochelle anyway, not to beg, not even to reconcile. I want to call and ask if any of it had been real. Our road trips to Saugatuck. In the winter, we painted the living room in 3 wrong shades before finding one we both liked. The way she cried into my sweatshirt when her aunt died. Betrayal makes memory suspicious. It is one of the cruelest parts. You start cross-examining your own joy. One rainy night in July, I sat in my truck outside our old favorite Thai place with her number open on my screen. Then I locked the phone and drove home. Missing someone is not evidence. I rebuilt by doing boring things on purpose. I refinished my kitchen table instead of buying a new one. I started walking Bell aisle at sunrise on Tuesdays before opening the shop. I signed up to teach a free Saturday class for middle school boys at the community center, showing them how gears worked, how patience mattered, how fixing small things trained your hands for bigger disappointments. My cousin said I was trying to repair myself through tiny brass pieces. She was probably right. Healing is rarely cinematic. It is often just repetition with better boundaries. It is sweeping your own floor. It is cooking for one and not calling that loneliness every time. That autumn, I met Imani at a neighborhood literacy fundraiser my mother bullied me into attending. Imani owned a used bookstore with plants in every window and the kind of laugh that started in her chest. She was 38, divorced, wore bright scarves even in warm weather, and did not ask delicate questions just because my face looked like a man with a story. We ended up talking near the dessert table about old hymnals, city kids, and why everybody underestimates glue. She had a small scar near one eyebrow and a habit of tapping book spines when she was thinking. Being around her felt neither dizzy nor dull. It felt possible. Rochelle called in October from a number I did not know. I almost ignored it, then answered because avoidance could become its own addiction. Her voice was ragged. "Can we meet?" she asked. "No," I said. She inhaled sharply. "Please, just 10 minutes." Against my better judgment, I agreed to bench area near the Riverwalk the next afternoon. Public and bright and full of joggers. Rochelle arrived in sunglasses too large for her face. She looked thinner, older. "Damon is leaving for Washington," she said before she sat down. "He got a media job. He said this was always temporary." I looked out at the gray water. "I am sorry that happened," I told her, and I meant it in the limited way one human can be sorry for another without reopening a door. Rochelle took off the sunglasses. Her eyes were red. "I made a terrible mistake." I said nothing. She kept going because silence demands truth better than shouting ever can. I thought choosing Damon meant I was choosing passion, but it was the same old thing. He likes being wanted more than he likes being accountable. Then she looked at me with the desperation of somebody realizing their backup plan had become a closed building. "I want my marriage back." That was the moment people imagine as revenge. I think. The grand chance to wound back. To say the cruel line you saved in your pocket. What I felt instead was tired clarity. "You do not want your marriage back," I said. "You want relief from the consequences of your choices." Rochelle shook her head hard. "That is not true." I let her have the denial. "If Damon had asked you to come with him, you would not be on this bench." Her mouth trembled, but she did not answer. That was enough to answer. I stood up. "I hope you learn from this," I said, "but you are not learning it with me." The divorce became final in November in a beige county building with bad lighting and vending machines humming near the elevators. No music, no big emotional summit. Just signatures, dates, and the slow legal acknowledgement that something once public and celebrated had ended in fluorescent quiet. Outside, the air had turned sharp again. Leaves scraped along the curb. Rochelle stood beside Adrian near the steps, holding her folder to her chest. "Ellis," she said. I turned. She looked like she wanted one last absolution. "I am sorry for what I did to you, especially at your mother's dinner." I nodded. "I know." Then I walked to my car and did not look back. If you respect the way Ellis chose peace over public revenge, make sure you like this video. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that being somebody's backup plan is never love. And subscribe for more original Black relationship drama stories, cheating wife revenge stories, and powerful first-person narrations where actions have real consequences. The next spring, my mother hosted Easter dinner at her house, and I brought Imani, who won over my aunties by complimenting the greens before she even sat down. After dessert, my mother caught me alone in the kitchen while I wrapped leftovers in foil. "You all right?" She asked the same question she had asked me my whole life after every hard thing. I looked through the window at Imani laughing on the porch with my cousins, at the city softening into evening, and I understood something clean. Rochelle did not ruin me when she chose humiliation over honesty. She revealed the exit. I was the one who had enough self-respect to take it. What stayed with me in this story was not Rochelle crying by the river. It was Ellis leaving the fellowship hall without performing pain for strangers, and later choosing closure over revenge in Ms. Benedict's office. A boundary is not cruel just because it disappoints somebody. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do after public disrespect is make one private decision and keep it. The end.